guys, it's Linda from Waken You again. It's another meal on a budget. So this week we have spent a little bit more than $29. $29.20 actually. But we're making a hearty vegetable stew. And in doing that, I ended up buying a couple of items that I typically normally wouldn't buy. This is a bottle of de-alcoholized, yeah, that's a fun word, for $8.14. I find in stews, wine is a great flavor enhancer. If you don't want to spend the $8, you can opt out of that and just use some more of the broth that we have. The other item is portobello mushrooms, which are significantly more expensive. This was $4.37. If you don't want to use a portobello mushroom and you want to go with a cremini or some of the smaller brown mushrooms, they add a little bit of a hearty texture to the stew. I just like to have the portobello, so that's why I spent that little bit of extra money, but it's not required. Everything here is always optional. I ended up spending a little bit more on my carrots than I expected to. They were on sale at the store for $1.44, but unfortunately everyone was buying carrots and they were sold out of the sales ones. So I ended up paying $3.47 for my carrots this week when I probably shouldn't have. But again, $29.20 that were spent for all of this. It's going to give us several days of stews. I'm going to make it in one large batch, put it into the freezer, and we can have it throughout the winter. So come back in a few minutes and we'll get this started. And we're back. So the first step in making this stew is to get the flavor foundation ready. So for this, we're using 1 clove of garlic, finely chopped up. We're also going to use 1 small onion, 1 carrot, but these are quite small, so I'm using 2 carrots and a rib of celery. And also a 1/4 cup of our vegetable stock. We're doing that so that we can get these sauteed in the pan, get a nice flavor base on it, and that'll be our foundation for this stew. I'm doing this stew today in my pan on the stovetop. You could do this in a pressure cooker XL, which I love mine. You can do it in an Instant Pot because they have the sear function on it, so you can cook your vegetables, your foundation base, and build it from there. If you're doing this in a slow cooker, which I know a lot of people have, without the searing functionality on it, you'd end up having to do this part in a pan anyway because you want that flavor base of the sauteing onions, garlic, and mirepoix that most people call it. But we're going to get this started. We'll get the pan going, and we'll be back in just a minute to show you the rest. So while I'm finishing up getting the flavor base ready for you, I just wanted to mention one little tip. Obviously you wash and peel your carrots and stuff, but for the roux, we want it to be a very small bites, or actually not even bites. It's just a flavor base. So what I'm using is this peeler that is a flat peeler on one side, and then it actually shreds your carrots into small little strips, like the matchstick carrots you would buy at the grocery store. And that way it is a lot smaller pieces to put into your flavor base, because this isn't going to be what makes your stew hearty and thick. This is just what's going to be flavoring it. So the recipe called for minced carrots, so I'm cheating and using my little tool. Just a tip. We'll be back in a second. So that is our flavor base. All of the vegetables, the carrots, the celery, and the onion are softened. I did that in about a 1/4 cup of the broth to get it nice and softened. The brown bits on the bottom are great, just a little bit of added flavor. We have 1 large chopped up onion here, and this is bigger chops because this is actually what you're going to be eating. We've got that all ready to go. We're going to let that saute a little bit, let the onion cook down. And while we've done that, we'll go through the rest of the ingredients here. We have 1 small package of button mushrooms. You can do cremini if you like. We have the 2 large portobello mushroom caps. I have 2 or 3 large potatoes. I leave the peels on, but it's entirely up to you. 2 carrots. These are a larger chop than what we did for the base because it's what's going to make it the hearty. And 2 ribs of celery. We also need to have a large can of diced tomatoes, a small can of tomato sauce, some flour that you should have on hand at home, if not some cornstarch, also some rosemary and Italian seasoning, the dealcoholized red wine, if you're using that, if not, just the stock, as well as the stock that you have purchased. We only need about half a cup of this if you're only using the red wine. If you're using, you need 3 cups of the stock. Almost 4 cups if you're deciding to use the red wine. So it's 3 cups, or if you're not using the red wine. This is a confusing thing. We're going to be using 3 cups of broth. 3.5 cups if you are not going to be deglazing the pan with your red wine. Either way, this 1 container of broth will do the entire recipe. So we've got the onions cooking down. We're going to be ready in just about a minute to toss everything else in the pan. Be back in just a second. We've added our mushrooms. They have sweated down. Sweating mushrooms never look very great in the pan. They taste delicious. So now we're going to add half a cup of our red wine. And we are just going to let that deglaze the pan a little bit. So we'll scrape off all of the brown bits because that's where all of the flavor is kept. And once that is there, so there's no crispy brown bits on the bottom of the pan, then we will add the 3 cups of our broth, our tomato sauce, as well as our diced tomatoes. Give that a little bit of a stir. So now we have quite the watery vegetable soup. Add in some salt and pepper. Turn the pot up to high, and we will add in all of our chopped vegetables. So we have our celery, our carrots, and our potatoes. Stir all of this up. We're going to bring this to a boil. So however long that's going to take. The one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video is I usually do put in some frozen peas. And in that $29.20 that I mentioned, there is a bag of frozen peas that I purchased as well. So I will pull those out of the freezer and get them ready. And we will be back in just a minute to finish this all up.
Cut.
So the one thing I forgot to mention, when we tossed in all of the vegetables into the pot, if you have balsamic vinegar on hand, it's a good idea to put a tablespoon into your stew. It just adds a little bit of acid to the pan that's not the tomato acid. So we have English, wonderful. We have our stew mixed up together. So we're just waiting for it to boil. What I've done here is created a slurry. So it's a little bit of water and 2 tablespoons of flour. You can use cornstarch if you have that on hand, but that's an additional cost. So this is just going to get well incorporated. And once the stew comes to boil, we are going to add this in, which it is boiling now. So we will add that into our stew. Stir it up, and that's going to be our thickening agent. It is going to take this liquidy tomato vegetable mix that we have going in the pan and turn it into a luxurious gravy that you can use if you're having some bread, if you're having cornbread, things like that. Obviously those would be extra costs, but this will be a nice hearty winter stew. It is vegetarian, and if you use a vegetable broth, it is vegan as well. If you are a meat eater and wanted to add meat to this, at the beginning when you are browning your flavor base, that's when you would add the beef or whatever meat you wanted to use and get that seared off. Put the vegetables in and cook it the way that you want to. So we're going to, because it's boiling, we're going to take it down to simmer. We're going to let it do its little magic, simmer for 20-25 minutes until it gets that richness that we're looking for, and then it'll be good to eat or let cool down and put it into the freezer. I hope you enjoy it. We'll post a picture of it when it is completed. Stay well, stay safe, and have a happy holiday.